file suit against the FDA to return the tryptophan. If Dr. Wright wins the suit and forces the FDA to return his untainted tryptophan, the FDA will have trouble explaining its continuing ban. Now, only days after Dr. Wright filed suit against the FDA began an intense investigation of Dr. Wright. The investigation consisted of FDA agent Spencer Morrison and other agents going to the clinic at night and sifting through the trash bins outside the building, because he had dared to file suit against the FDA. How dare he do that? During this dumpster inspection, it reminds me of Peter Sellers for some reason, out in the middle of the night tripping over boxes and trash cans trying to find some evidence against the super spy from the evil empire. Only this is a dumpster outside of a little medical clinic in Kent, Washington, whose doctor had filed suit against the all-powerful FDA. Something tells me when this story gets out, they're not going to be so all-powerful anymore. If my feeling about how Americans are going to feel about this is right, and I believe that it is, I believe they will be outraged. Outraged, as they should. So during this dumpster inspection, FDA agents found empty vials of B-complex and B12 vitamins from Germany, as well as other nutritional agents, none of which were illegal, and no drugs of any kind, legal or illegal, were found. These were natural nutritional supplements that you probably have in your own home at this very moment. The only thing different about them is that the B12 and B-complex vitamins from Germany are purer than most of the available B-complex and B12 vitamins available in this country. And thus we're safer, and are safer, and will continue to be safer. An affidavit prepared by Spencer Morrison led to a warrant signed by Judge John Weinberg authorizing the search and seizure. But was a raid necessary? Was a raid necessary? Armed police officers and FDA agents wearing flak jackets and carrying guns, breaking down doors only 10 minutes before the clinic was to open? Herding innocent employees into a room and surrounding them with gun-toting, vicious stormtroopers? Causing one employee to go into cardiac arrhythmia, from which he has not recovered to this day. Another very young new employee having recurrent nightmares to this day. All of them terrorized. Was this necessary? Hardly. Of course not. Not necessary at all. If the FDA was concerned about Dr. Wright's German-made nutritional products, they could have walked in and asked. He certainly didn't keep it a secret. The Germans, dear listeners, are the only ones who make a preservative-free B-complex and B12 vitamin for injection. Many of Dr. Wright's patients have allergic reactions to the American products, all of which contain preservatives. Hence, he imports preservative-free, pure, preservative-free nutrients. This vicious, and I mean vicious, raid by FDA agents will forever be known as the Great B Vitamin Bust. And who in the world ever made the FDA a police force? When did the FDA obtain the right to wear flak jackets and carry guns and break down doors? That is a function of law enforcement agencies, isn't it? Public outrage, dear listeners, was swift and uncompromising. On May 11th, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, the largest newspaper in the northwest of the United States, ran an editorial which read, quote, "If there is any plausible excuse for the Gestapo-like tactics used in a raid on a Kent alternative medicine clinic last week, it had better be forthcoming, and fast. Were armed terrorists believed to be getting vitamin shots in the clinic? Were naturopathic revolutionaries plotting the violent overthrow of the American Medical Association's National Convention? Were crack and methamphetamine laboratories believed to be bubbling away in the back room? No. No, no, and no." The Journal American, another prominent newspaper in the area, wrote this, quote, "Pistol-toting agents in the United States Food and Drug Administration team acted like they expected armed opposition from frightened clinic employees. The conduct of the raid was more in keeping with SWAT team for known crack cocaine dealers. An absurd overkill for the purpose of seizing dietary supplements, patient records, and some clinic equipment." They seized patient records. Could be your records if you live in that area. Unquote. Several months before the raid, FDA agent Victor Mio from Seattle, Washington, posed as a patient under an assumed name and received treatment at the clinic. Victor Mio described the medical treatment he received in the affidavit presented to Judge Weinberg. Mio was carefully evaluated by Dr. Wright, who, not knowing that Mio was lying about his symptoms, outlined a testing and treatment program designed to help him. He was treated in a professional and competent manner by all those who attended him, including Patty Hoops, who performed allergy testing on Agent Mio, and Marge Murphy and Jennifer Harrell, who rendered him service each time he came to the offices. He knew that they were employees. He knew that none of them carried guns. He knew that there were no weapons in the clinic. He knew all of these things, for he had been spying on them for quite some time. One thing should have been obvious to Victor Mio. This was an established medical clinic staffed by trained and licensed healthcare providers dispensing medical services. No one was armed or engaged in any clandestine activities whatsoever. Victor Mio returned to these offices as part of the pumped-up terrorist group of FBI stormtroopers to terrorize the very people who had tried to help him, leaving many of them with psychological scars which will probably be with them for the rest of their lives. Television news crews flocked to the clinic when word got out that a doctor was being raided by armed FDA agents. Victor Mio was filmed carrying out some of Dr. Wright's equipment. Knowing that he was on film, Victor Mio gives the finger to all who might be watching him engaged in public service. Where, dear listeners, does the FDA or any other government agency find such despicable employees? Well, apparently there's a lot of them, because this is nothing new. But for once, the whole nation is going to hear about it, which usually never happens. And if you want to continue to have available vitamins and minerals and other natural, naturopathic health food supplements and natural treatments for whatever ails you, and you should have the right to that, you had better do something about this. You'd better get angry, as I know some of you listening already are. It's another intrusion upon the privacy of every American citizen. It is another step toward the police state. It is another step into the New World Order. This FDA raid was not to halt any criminal activity, but to investigate possible regulatory infractions. Rather than walking into the clinic and asking to see the B vitamins, the FDA went to the King County Police and asked for armed support for a raid. But this time, the raid wasn't going after the cockroaches. The cockroaches were performing the raid. The medical clinic had been in business for close to 20 years and had never been suspected of any criminal activity ever. Had never had any complaints to any government agency whatsoever in its history. However, when asked by the FDA for a dozen or so armed police, Lieutenant Robin Fulton of the King County Police simply said okay, without checking the purpose, without looking for charges, without asking any questions. This little gung-ho, first-in-line SS officer for the King County Police simply said okay. And it's a she, probably so eager to be one of the boys she couldn't wait. Incredibly, she apparently never even read the search warrant that listed B12 and B-complex vitamins as major regions for a raid force of close to 24 personnel, most of them armed. And if they're going after B-complex and B12 vitamins, why haven't they raided every health food store in the nation? Because, dear listeners, that's not what it was all about. Dr. Wright had dared to sue the FDA to return untainted, good medical tryptophan back into his possession, which they had seized in 1991. That's why according to Food and Drug Insider Report, a regularly published newsletter on FDA activities, many of the King County Police were disgusted with their participation in this raid. And I think that's baloney. I think they saw all the publicity attended to that raid. I think they read the newspaper a couple of times. And I think now all they're doing is CYA. You know what that means? They're just covering their own ass. Period. They were really disgusted. They should have been disgusted before or during, not after. None of them were disgusted while they were mistreating these people. None of them were disgusted when they finally found what was being taken out and what it was all about at the end of the raid. They were only disgusted after the public became outraged at them. Dr. Wright and others contend that the raid was part of the war the FDA has with all individuals who espouse the use of nutritional supplements or any other alternative therapies. Indeed, an FDA staffer told the Food and Drug Insider Report, quote, "There is a definite bias against alternative medicine within FDA. It would not matter how much scientific evidence accumulated. We will just not recognize the credibility of this field of medicine. The historical bias continues and cannot be overcome. When FDA is accused of being unfair to alternative medicine providers, it's true." Unquote. And there you have it. Not only did the FDA needlessly endanger lives A nurse could have been shot and killed, but they confiscated virtually everything in Dr. Wright's office.